Hey frugal friends, so if you've been around a while, you know this channel is all about saving you more money. Well, today I'm finally sharing the results from a challenge I did throughout the month of August called the Every Bit Counts Challenge. I wanted to see how much money I could save through preserving food instead of letting it go to waste. And now for my channel, this isn't all about gardening stuff. There's going to be a few items I'm grabbing from my garden, but I'm also showing you times when I got food on discounts, times when I got really good deals at the grocery store, and I'm preserving that food so that it doesn't go to waste later on in the week. So as you see right here, I'm taking a bunch of my the last of my July crop of raspberries, and I'm freezing them. I'll get more raspberries in September, but this was the last of my July batch. And I got about a quart of frozen raspberries by the end of it. The next thing I was working on, this was another one garden project, I got a ton of herbs. Herbs are one of the only things that I've been able to harvest in the month of August because I just had a baby and I had to put my garden in very, very late. So I wasn't able to, unfortunately, get much of a harvest until just this week in the very end of August, except for herbs. Herbs are a year-round bounty, and I was able to get a ton of herbs, and you'll see right here I'm using my dehydrator, which I bought a couple years ago from Facebook Marketplace for $35. Some of the herbs I tried, like I'm showing you here with my cilantro, are ones that we purchased at the store, and we weren't going to be able to use them all fresh, so I wanted to make sure that we could put them away and not lose, fresh herbs are a little on the expensive side. So I wanted to make sure that we wouldn't lose all of that deliciousness. I'm gonna throw them in the dehydrator and get some herbs stocked up for the winter. The nice thing about herbs is that I was able to put 4 or 5 different kinds of herbs on different trays of the drying rack and dry them all at once. So I didn't have to do a batch of basil and then do a batch of oregano and then do a batch of the cilantro. Like I could just stack them all up and let it go. And for me, I was running them about 130 degrees for 4 hours when it was completely stacked. There was another time when I did just a couple layers of basil, and that only took about 2 or 3 hours. So you'll see I did okay. This is only half the basil that I ended up putting away. Some of them I like the cilantro, I was able to fill an entire little container. What's that, the quart size? Pint size, that's a pint. An entire pint of cilantro. Whereas you'll see with like the rosemary, it really shrunk when it was drying and I didn't get all that much at all. But you don't want to take too much or you kill the plant. The other thing I do to reduce food waste is when my kids have smoothies and they're toddlers and preschooler, they don't finish them, turn them into freeze pops and there you go. The other thing I did is I made an Aldi trip, which if you saw on my last video, I got some mushrooms. This is a different Aldi trip. I got double mushrooms. I got so many mushrooms. They were actually just starting to turn and I knew I wasn't going to be able to use them all up. So I sliced up, probably 12 ounces of mushrooms and I just went crazy dehydrating them. I had some in some mushroom ramen recently. They turned out so good. Oh my word. I also was checking the prices of these. I'll tell you at the end how much I saved by preserving all of this food instead of letting it go to waste. Dried mushrooms are very expensive, so this is kind of like a delicacy. Unfortunately, I had an accident and I accidentally left the top uncovered from my dried mushrooms. I put them in the quart-sized container and then didn't seal them with the lid. And because August is so humid, they started to rehydrate and I actually had to go back and dehydrate them. And the other thing I did with a bunch of the mushroom stems that I didn't want, also of course my carrot bits and onion bits, I made 2-3 quarts of stock, which will be great for things in the winter. Of course, when you're trying to do some food preservation and you're working on cutting down your grocery budget, sometimes there are casualties. I had purchased a bunch of kiwi at one of the Aldi trips I did because my daughter loves kiwi. However, she decided that week that she didn't want to eat any of them. And so they were starting to go bad. I tried dehydrating them because Pinterest told me you could, but Yeah, these didn't taste anything like the kind that I was used to getting at the store. I think what I'm used to eating is probably freeze-dried kiwi. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, it wasn't good at all. It was such a weird taste. However, something that wasn't a weird taste was this. I was at the store. We found a giant sale on bacon. They call it a fire sale at this particular store, which means the sell-by date or the going out of code date was that day. And so they had it discounted tremendously. Like it was usually $10 a pound and they were selling it for $2 a pound. So I bought 3 pounds of bacon and we just cooked everything up that day. I decided that we would, actually it was my husband's idea, decided, you know what, we're gonna dirty the pans, we'll get everything done. And it actually took 6 different trays of bacon. And I always cook bacon in these trays. I use a thing of aluminum foil. I throw it in the oven because then there is virtually no mess. And I can also save the grease later, which I'll show you in a second. But sometimes that's what you need to do when it comes to meat, is make sure you're finding those sales. The food, it wasn't bad. A couple of the packages did look a little off, and so my husband and I like poked through. We got the good ones and it tasted amazing, and now I've got a bunch in the freezer. There's my lard that I'll save for later. I'll just use that in place of butter in a lot of recipes. Final thing I got up to this month was zucchini. This is the second zucchini I was able to pull out of my garden in the month of August. I've got a bunch more coming in, so hopefully I'll be able to put even more away. And I'm going to shred it up and throw it in the freezer because I really love having frozen shredded zucchini. I find that you can wring out so much more of the water content from a zucchini if you freeze it first. So if you have a recipe that calls for like really well dried shredded zucchini, like if you're gonna make fritters or something, I like to freeze it first, and then when you thaw it, there's just a ton of water that just pours out and it's very little work on your part. I did do a minimal amount of that, as you'll see in a minute, to try to reduce the water content before putting it in the freezer. But all I really need to do is shred it. I pressed it between some towels. Note to my future self, make sure that you don't mind if your white towel turns green, which luckily that is kind of a junk towel, but yeah, it's green now, so I'll have to get that stain out. The original Every Bit Counts challenge does require you to try to preserve food every day for the entire month of August. I didn't quite make it to that, but as a mom of 3 little kids, I've got a baby, a toddler, and a preschooler, and it's just me running around while my husband's at work. So I was very pleased that I was able to do some kind of food preservation project 30% of the days in August. So I call that a win. And then the next thing I'm going to be doing with all of this zucchini, I'm going to have to start making some zucchini bread. I found a very good looking recipe for sourdough zucchini bread. I had a few of you asking in my last video what I use for sourdough starter recipes, and I just follow the Farmhouse on Boone lady. Oh, and before we finish, I want to show you how I get all of the air out of bags. Now, I don't do this with like raw meat before putting it in the freezer, but if it's cooked meat or if it's like a vegetable, I use a straw and suck out all of the air that's in the bag, and you can see it just start to shrink up right there, and that really helps cut back on freezer burn, and I really enjoy doing things that way, that they're well preserved. That goes right in the freezer. All right, I'm tired. I almost said it's tired, I'm late. Yes, it's late, I'm tired, but I did want to talk about exactly how much a project like this saved me in terms of money. In terms of time, honestly, over the course of the entire month, a couple hours is all it really took. Most of the work was hands-off stuff. So like when I was making my stock, it was just a matter of putting things in a pot with some water and letting it boil and simmer for a couple hours. When it was putting things in the dehydrator, I just threw them in the dehydrator and waited a couple of hours. The hands-on time was really limited to picking things from the garden, if it was a garden thing, a couple extra minute detour to look for a markdown if I was in the store, or like the chopping of vegetables, or things of that nature, but really minimal time for all of this. And here's what I did some math, and I like compared what I got for what a similar product would be if I bought it in store. One of the interesting things I thought about this project was it's not just a matter of removing the waste from the equation, but I'm actually adding value when I do these preservation projects, because when I make these things shelf stable, I'm not on a timer for when I have to use them. I'm able to use them at my leisure, my leisure. And so oftentimes a lot of the prices of things are inflated when they're more shelf stable, because more work was done to get them to that point. So I did the math for how much I got in frozen raspberries. It was about $1.50. Not a huge project there. That's mostly because we keep eating the raspberries. My kids really like going to the backyard and like picking a couple to snack on every day. And man, we're gonna have a bumper crop in September. Basil, I probably got $7 worth of dried basil when all was said and done. Probably $8 of dried cilantro if I wanted to buy like a similar sized little like bottle of herb or container of herbs, in the herb section. Probably like $1 for all the other herbs combined. It was really minimal amounts. I dried some red raspberry leaves to make tea. I like to give those as gifts. I have a lot of friends who are pregnant right now, and that's, a good herb tea to drink when you're at the end of your pregnancy. Probably $5 worth of dried mushrooms. Between the bacon and the lard, from what I paid and how much it should have cost, that was a savings of about $24. So that was a really great one. And 1.5 pounds of frozen zucchini was for about $7 if I were to buy 2 bags of frozen zucchini in the store. So all told, through the month of August, for a couple hours of work, I saved $57.50. So I consider that a big win. And thank you to Jessica over at Three Rivers Homestead for running this challenge, because I had a very enjoyable time. And if you want to see more videos of me in my garden, let me know in the comments, because I do love that, and I can tell the story of why the channel is actually called Homegrown Hillary another time. This video is already too long, but I will see you all again later, and you can watch this video next. Bye, YouTube.